You know how everything's a subscription now? Music, movies, even socks. I swear if I...
To continue this ad, please upgrade to Premium Plus Platinum.
What? No. Anyway, Blue Apron...
This is a pay-per-listen ad. Please confirm your billing.
Oh, that's annoying. At least with the new Blue Apron, there's no subscription needed. Get delicious meals delivered without the weekly plan.
Wait, no subscription?
Keep the flavor. Ditch the subscription. Get 20% off your first 2 orders with code APRON20. Terms and conditions apply. Visit blueapron.com/terms for more.
Hello everyone and welcome to Haway The Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for our Thursday morning podcast. There's always stuff to talk about in the world of Sunderland, and would you know it, we're here this morning to bring you up to date on a couple of stories which have occurred over the last day or so since we last recorded. First off, just introduce my mate across the camera today. It's Andrew Smithson. Hello, mate.
Hello, mate. Never a dull moment, is there?
No. Well, luckily the club thought, we'll do the lads a favour though. We'll keep this announcement of signing a player till later in the day, so they've got something to talk about. And late on Wednesday, the club did finally announce the signing of Marc Guiu from Chelsea on a season-long loan. He comes in for a full season, and according to Fabrizio Romano, it's a straight loan. There's no obligation to buy or anything, so he's literally just coming here to play games. It was reported that the club had sent several planes to pick him up in Barcelona, but he wanted a little bit of time off, so he ended up making his own way to the northeast by train a couple of days later, which, whatever, if they're happy with that, we're happy with that. And he's finally signed on the dotted line, done his medical, is a Sunderland player for the next 12 months or so, and is a very exciting young player. I mean, I can't claim to have seen a lot of him, but he's played for Barcelona and scored goals, a goal for Barcelona at a young age, then moved on to Chelsea, where he actually, he's only 19-year-old, but they kind of kept him for the European competition last season, and he scored a lot of goals. He was their top scorer in Europe last season as they went on to win the Conference League. He scored 6 goals, made 16 appearances across the whole season. That does include sub appearances, obviously, but a young player, somebody who we've brought in clearly to just give us a different option up front. We've got pacey players who can play off the shoulder, who can drop deep and dribble and run at defences, where Marc Guiu looks like he's going to be a bit more of a target man, line leader, somebody who can hold up the ball and stuff, so it gives us a different option. We've spoken quite a lot about him recently, so this finally puts a bit of closure to that. He is finally a Sunderland player. And Kristjaan Speakman had this to say about the signing. He said, "In a loan acquisition, we not only have to convince the player, but also the parent club. And we thank Chelsea for placing their trust in us. Most importantly, Marc wanted to come to Sunderland and be a part of our club. The competition for his signature was significant, and he had many high-quality options this summer, so we are delighted he's joined Sunderland. Marc's a progressive striker who has key attributes that align with the role in our team. In addition to providing a threat in the final third, we believe there are many other ways he can impact games, and we look forward to helping him do that throughout the 2025-26 season." So there's a lot I want to pick out of that statement from Kristjaan Speakman, but before we do that, just quickly throw it to you, get your thoughts on this. It's nice to get it over the line, isn't it? I mean, he's going to be available for the games at the weekend. He's going to have a bit of training with the team before, half the group jet off to Germany and the other half don't. I'm just glad to get this one over the line. It's another box tick. We've got a striker through the door.
Yeah, it looked pretty strong. It was a strong chance we were going to sign him, but until it's actually done and dusted, there is always that fear. So yeah, we can now be pleased that this deal is done. We can move on to other targets. I hadn't really realised until seeing the photos on the club website, this lad is absolutely stacked. He is,
6'2", broad. He's a big boy.
Exactly. So that, even without seeing him, that just gives you an idea of the type of player we've brought in here. I quite like that in a forward player. I think it's good to have somebody who has that bit of physicality. and it would appear as if that's what he's been brought in to do. People are pretty positive about this one, Gav, aren't they? People that have watched him seem to think quite highly of him. So that's a positive. Until we see him in the flesh, we're not going to know for sure. But the signs are encouraging. And that line there, that might be one of the things you want to focus on particularly. But the fact that clubs trust us with their to take a player on loan, they trust us with their prospect, I think is credit to the club, because we've been doing this for a couple of years now, and it is a really good reputation to have. It's really important that Sunderland can approach clubs and in the back of the mind, they're thinking, oh yeah, well, we know Sunderland will do right by them and give them a good chance of progressing.
Yeah, they haven't been put off by the fact that we took Mason Burstow a couple of seasons ago. They're probably just of the same opinion as us and maybe thinking he wasn't great, was he? Maybe they felt like they had to do us a favour after sending him to us.
Yeah, maybe Chelsea suddenly felt guilty and thought, oh, we better settle this and give Sunderland a bit of a leg up.
I forgot the quote that was from Guiu himself as well, so I'll quickly read it. He said, "I'm feeling great and really looking forward to the season ahead. I see myself as a powerful striker," which obviously he looks a big lad, doesn't he? Who can make a difference on and off the ball, and I pride myself on being a natural goal scorer. This year is a huge opportunity for me to help to take this team from where... This year is a huge opportunity for me to help take this team where it truly deserves to be, and I can't wait to get started. But yeah, I want to kind of dig into some of the things that Kristjaan Speakman said, because rather than just coming out with the usual platitudes, he's a great player, we can't wait to get him involved, blah, blah, blah. There's actually quite a lot of meat on the bone here. The first line, he says, "In a loan acquisition, we not only have to convince the player, but also the parent club, and we thank Chelsea for placing their trust in us." So you mentioned it there, that thing about the trust from other clubs and things, but it's true. And I think it won't have been ignored by a lot of clubs that Sunderland are very good at developing and giving chances to young players. We've got a head coach with a proven track record of working with young players, giving opportunities, a structure which supports young players. So that'll have been a big thing on certainly on Chelsea's radar, and they won't want to send him somewhere where he's going to get one chance and then out the team for 4 games, maybe with a manager who would prefer an experienced option. We've got a manager who doesn't care whether you're 19 or 29. If you're the best man for the job, you'll get a go. So that is important, and I'm glad you raised that. But as Kristjaan Speakman says, most importantly, Marc wanted to come to Sunderland and be a part of our club. Now, this reminded me of a man we spoke about a few weeks ago on a worst foreign imports podcast we did, Adnan Januzaj, because I whinged like hell then about the fact he never wanted to play for Sunderland. It was clear. And you've got to be careful when you do bring in players from bigger clubs, young players especially. I mean, he's played for Barcelona and Chelsea. Sunderland are still a massive club, but we're not Barcelona, and we don't have that trophy haul that Chelsea have got in recent years, certainly in the last couple of decades. So, it is, to him, it's probably a bit of a step down to go back up, but it's still a huge opportunity. And the fact that he wants to come here is, that's kind of been the basis for every signing we've made recently, hasn't it? We're not signing players who feel like we owe them a living. They're coming here and they want to roll their sleeves up and work hard.
It's really important that players have that attitude, because the second somebody turns up and starts being a bit of a bad apple in the changing rooms, it's going to have a negative impact on other players. I fully understand that these lads have got their own career to look after. But yeah, the ideal is you want a player who wants to do well for themselves and wants to do well for the club. And to be able to do that, they have to feel comfortable. And I know we're saying it's only a year, but I mean, 12 months is canny long, particularly when you're a young lad. Now, if I was saying to you, Gav, I want you to start a new job or work with a new company starting tomorrow, it's only going to be 12 months. Well, you wouldn't just go, oh, all right then, I'll go along for the crack and see how it is. You're going to want to ask me questions and what's this company like? Are they going to look after us? Blah, blah, blah. So yeah, just because it's not a permanent signing doesn't mean you have to just get any old body through the door. You want somebody who's committed and wants to do well for Sunderland. And that seems to be the case here. And yeah, you'd like to think that personal pride and professional pride will mean that this lad wants to give his best, regardless if he's here for a year or, something might change and down the line he might end up being a permanent signing. You never know. Yeah. But yeah, being alone doesn't mean you can just think, oh, well, I'll just turn up and not bother.
Yeah. Well, in the face of a lot of competition at Chelsea, significant competition, you look at, I know this summer they've went out and signed João Pedro, they've went out and signed Liam Delap up front. So, two quality options ahead of him in the pecking order. So it's quite clear he had to probably go out and loan, especially at 19-year-old. But even last season, there were players ahead of him in the pecking order, and he was still trusted to play in the European games and did well. But he didn't get loads of opportunities, but he clearly took his chance because he scored goals. If we were signing this lad and it said, he made 16 appearances last season and scored once, I might be sat there going, oh, okay, he's very raw, this lad. But he got a handful of chances, really, when you look at it, and he took them. He scored goals, and I think that's important here. We're not just getting we're getting a very raw, untested young lad who clearly hasn't played a lot of football, but we're clearly getting somebody who's got ability and has been trusted and can, from a physical perspective, can clearly cope. And Chelsea are going to be sending him here going, right, Mark, now you go to Sunderland, you go there and score 10, 15 goals for Sunderland, you're straight back into our thinking next season at 20-year-old at Chelsea. A bit like what's happened with Liam Delap, I guess, in a way. He went to Ipswich, having been in Man City's books, went to Hull, then Ipswich. But he's kind of worked his way back up to get that opportunity. Not every player has to leave a club permanently to do that, but there are a lot of cases where that happens. In the case of Marc Guiu, he could have stayed at Chelsea, could have had another year playing off the bench in Europe and cup games and the odd Premier League appearance here and there. No, he's come out to play regular football. And I do think, we're going to get on talking about Eliezer Mayenda in a bit, but it shouldn't be daunting for Mayenda and Isidore in particular that we've signed another striker because, I would like to think that this lad, given his skill set, is there to complement them. So, you can imagine a big lad up front who can hold up. And I've watched some of the footage I've watched him. He's got pace for a big boy. So, he can turn and run as well. But somebody like that, alongside a Mayenda and Isidore, completely changes their game. All of a sudden, you're not asking Isidore to go toe-to-toe with Burley centre-half, so we're going to knock him off the ball. You're saying, when you play off the shoulder, wait for him to get you in behind. Or, do you know what I mean? It totally does change their game, and perhaps it'll even help them adapt to the Premier League a little bit more. So it shouldn't be daunting for them players that I think we're bringing in another striker.
No, it shouldn't. And just any professional should look at new players coming into the squad and rather than see it as a negative towards them, they should see it as a positive. And like you say, how can this player help improve my position and help improve my game? So you'd like to think that Isidore and Mayenda are treating it with that type of attitude. And with regards Marc Guiu, we've seen it ourselves, Gav, with Sunderland. The clubs now don't just throw players in the team for the sake of it. They've got long-term plans in place for these players. They see them as a bit of a project. So yeah, last season they thought he was ready to play a few games in Europe, and now they think he's ready to make the next step. The fact that he wasn't getting more minutes in other competitions for them last season doesn't necessarily say to me that Chelsea have written him off. It says to me, if anything, they really think they've got a potential player on their hands, but they want to do it right and give him the best chance to improve as he gets older and as his body gets bigger. I look at what he's done so far in the game and think it's quite positive. And yeah, now's the time for him to just move up a level. And if that benefits us as well as it does his own personal career, it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah. Another part of that little segment from Speakman, which I think is worth talking about, was the bit where he said the competition for his signature was significant and he had many high-quality options this summer, so we're delighted that he's joined Sunderland. So, again, we're not signing a player who's kind of bottom of the barrel, scraping around for a move somewhere. Like, you know, there's been a few, I'm not going to name names necessarily, but there's been a few transfers already in the Premier League where I'm looking at them going, really? Like, you know, I would be disappointed if we signed them. It's a bit different. This lad, you know, he's not struggling for a move. But what I would say is probably, and this will have played on the minds of Chelsea when deciding where to send him, where was the best option. Aside from the things we said before about Lebris and the track record of improving young players and the fact we give chances to young players, the fact we have a fan base who's completely embracing this, you know, youthful approach to playing football. Aside from all of that, we are a Premier League club, and Chelsea are a Premier League club. If he goes on loan to Italy or France or Spain, where I imagine they had plenty of interest, you know, from other top leagues in Europe, it's not the same. I mean, you know, there is benefit for him playing in Serie A. There is benefit for him playing in Germany. But at the end of the day, Chelsea want him to play in the Premier League for them at some point. They want Marc Guiu to come. Their ideal situation is he goes back there, he scored 15, 20 goals, which might be, you know, a lofty target, but let's just say he could do it. They want him to go back there having scored 15 goals next season, being a part of their team. Now, the best way for him to prove that he is good enough to be a Chelsea player is to do it in the Premier League somewhere else. So I would suspect, amongst a million other things, you know, I've already reeled off a load of them, the fact we're a big club, the fact that, you know, we have leaders like Granit Xhaka in the team who can give him guidance as a young player. All these things, you know, I could sit all day and tell you what I think about Son, and you know how much I love Son. But like, my point is that Chelsea must have looked at all these options and gone, actually, we want to send him to a team who play in the Premier League, and not only a team who play in the Premier League, but a team who have belief that they can stay up and they can compete. Because you could send him. I say no disrespect, but I don't think Burnley are going to stay up. You could go to a Burnley and get 30 odd games, but is he going to stay in the Premier League? Is he going to be in a team that's playing attacking football? I mean, Burnley didn't score many goals last season. They didn't concede many either, but it doesn't lend to you thinking, oh, well, you know, like, he's going to get loads of chances. We create quite a lot of chances. I know we're not the most forward-thinking team, but we do create chances. We do score goals. And I just think it suits everybody, this. And I just, looking at it from that perspective, though, looking at it from his club's perspective and his perspective, you can kind of see why maybe, you know, even if there were teams interested, which I imagine there were, who were playing in Europe next season, and that way it might have been quite tempting, you know, to send him to a team playing in the Europa League or the Conference League, maybe competing for a top 5, top 6 position in Serie A, La Liga or Liga 1 or whatever. That can be quite appealing, but it's obviously more appealing just to see how he does in the Premier League, because this could make or break his Chelsea career, couldn't it? If he has a shitter and he's no good, well, they're going to turn around and go, actually, you know, because to play for Chelsea in the Premier League, you've got to be ready to go, haven't you?
Definitely. And listen, Sunderland have had plenty of loan players come to us in the past, and as you quite rightly put it, have a shitter. So, you know, if this lad can come to Sunderland and make it work, then yeah, that really does hammer home to Chelsea. This kid's got a chance. A lot of the points you made there, Gav, I agree with 100%. Everything looks positive for all of the parties involved. It does sound as if he could have gone somewhere else, but Chelsea have looked at us, spoken to the player, obviously, made sure that this is the right fit for everybody. It bodes really well, Gav. It's a positive move as far as I can see. And if he's as good as we're led to believe, I think he'll be a popular player for us. I think a couple of people are a little bit concerned. There's a suggestion, isn't there, that he's going to have to play a minimum amount of games or start a certain amount of matches or whatever it is. But if he's good enough, that's not a problem. Yeah. You know, and if he's not good enough, well, we'll not play him just for the sake of it. Presumably there'll be some sort of fee involved, and we'll just pay that instead.
Yeah.
So, you know, if he does struggle, I don't think it's the end of the world. However, from what we can see, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I think he's going to do well for us, and he sounds like the type of player that fans are going to take to.
Yeah, and I think the club have clearly got a lot of faith in Isidore Mayenda too, because we're not allocating significant resource to get a striker in. We're actually loaning a player. And you want, there'll be, I would imagine there's some sort of fee. We'll be paying wages, possibly, So it's not as though you'd be coming here just for free and we've took the cheap option. But you do have to look around the pitch. We've obviously spent a lot of money in midfield. I think we need 2 defenders. That's going to cost a lot of money. We're probably going to spend money on another winger and possibly a goal scoring winger. You look at the option that we decided not to take on Loriente. Scored 20 odd goals last season. So clearly we see goals coming from the wide positions next season. But, at the same time, we've got belief in some of these other players, and that kind of brings us into the next thing I want to talk about, which is the fact that it looks as though, I say the fact, it's not actually confirmed yet, but Fabrizio Romano ran a story on Wednesday morning claiming that Sunderland have agreed a new contract with Eliezer Mayenda, set to be signed very soon and is valid until June 2030. Despite interest from several clubs, Mayenda only wanted to stay at Sunderland. So that kind of takes us into the next thing because, if we're getting players, we talked about this the other day when we talked about Dan Neil and the potential for him to sign a new deal. And this is the debate I keep having. We were having this debate when we were talking to Tom White on the podcast yesterday when, he was saying the easiest thing for the club to do right now in the summer would be just to give Dan Neil a contract. And I was saying, well, the thing is, we've spent so much money on other midfield players, which effectively took the captaincy away from him because we've signed Granit Xhaka. There's a whole other layer of complexity when it comes to the negotiation of the contract, because all of a sudden what you're doing is you're going, actually, we want you to stay, but we're also kind of diminishing your role in the team. Whereas it's very different with Eliezer Mayenda. We haven't gone out and signed 2 strikers who are going to take his place. We've went, all right, we're signing players to complement you and Wilson. We're going to sign another wide player. We're going to sign another striker, which we've done in Marc Guiu. But it's a loan. It's not a big layout. We clearly see a lot of potential in Eliezer Mayenda, as I think everybody does. And that's got to have played into the thinking because, as Fabrizio Romano said, there's been interest from other clubs. I'm sure there has. I mean, he's one of the most exciting forwards in England at his age. I mean, such a talented footballer, and he's got a lot to prove when he gets up to the Premier League. But, as he said, despite all that interest, he only wanted to stay with Sunderland. He signed up. I'm presuming when we signed him from Sochaux, which wasn't a particularly lucrative acquisition, a couple of €1 million I think he cost, and he was only young, and it was from a second tier team. Yeah. We won't have signed him on a massive contract. He's proven his worth. The club have decided to reward him like they did Regis Lebris the other day. Maybe wasn't completely necessary, but in the face of a bit of interest from other clubs, we've went, no, pay him what he's worth. His role has increased in this team. He deserves it. And the terms will, ensure the club as well. We said that when Job signed his contract last summer or whenever it was. We know what's inevitable we knew what was inevitable with Job. But it was like an insurance policy for the football club, as if to say, actually, get him on better terms. If he has a really good season, we aren't going to get done over by a bigger club who think they can just come along and pluck him off us and probably get him for less than what we think he's worth. This should insure the club. It, again, draws a line under any speculation. If anyone comes in now between now and the end of August, it's going to be a flat no. He's committed his future to Sunderland. He can crack on with his football. The club are happy in the knowledge that he's staying. And I just think this is such an underrated piece of business because Eliezer Mayenda is fantastic. I really do rate him.
He's a brilliant player. And if you look at the rate of his progress as well, like you say, Gav, we were signing him from the second tier. It wasn't a particularly big outlay. And now this lad's playing at Wembley, scoring goals at Wembley. He's got tens of thousands of people chanting his name. And that's because he's so good. He's been really important to the team. I think ever since, it was early in the year, he scored a couple of goals at Sheffield Wednesday. And
it was sort of pre-season. So I can remember because I was at the game. We played South Shields in the first game of pre-season, and he started up front. And I think we were kind of struggling for we didn't have Izzo at the time.
Yeah.
Hemia wasn't exactly lighting up the world, so he started that first game, and I remember I was pitch side, and I was like, bloody hell, he's grown a bit. Bear in mind, he'd just been on loan at Hibs, right? So he'd just been on loan at Hibs, hadn't done a thing, scored against Shields, and I think he scored a couple more in pre-season, and that kind of geared him up to the start of the season. And you're right, it was Chef Wed at home, he scored twice.
Yeah.
And you just thought, oh, yeah. And I know he's the club did very well at sort of not pushing him too far, but then at the end of the season, we kind of ran with Eliezer Mayenda. He was clearly the best striking option in the team. And as you mentioned before, got the goal at Wembley, scored against Coventry. We wouldn't have got promoted without him. So he's so important to us.
I think you're right. We wouldn't have got promoted without him. It was actually the away game I was referring to, Gav, that he scored 2.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
That was the one where he went from this lad, well, he's got something, he could do something here to, this player needs to be in our starting 11 for the rest of the season. It's ended with him being at Wembley and having an important part in promotion. So I'm not surprised that he wanted to stay at Sunderland. We've put a lot of faith in him. We've given him this opportunity. He's loved by the fans. So it's good that he is as equally keen on the club as we are of him. You mentioned there now that he signed a contract, if anybody comes sniffing, we can just give them a very easy no. But every player does have a price, and it's, if you have protected yourself with a good contract, if a top club does come in for him, it means we'll at least be able to get a good price now. So it looks after us in that point of view. It was said about when Regis Labris signed his contract a couple of days ago, wasn't it, Gav, that there'd been a bit of interest, and you quite rightly suggested that could have been Brentford. That would have made a lot of sense, given they're one of the few Premier League clubs who were looking for a new head coach. So fair play to the club. They reacted quickly to that. And it's the case with Mayenda as well. They've reacted quickly to that. For all we know, somebody has made a couple of inquiries and they've thought, no, we're happy with the progress he's making. We want to reward him for that. And we also just want to make sure our backs are covered as well, just in case over in the next few months he hits the ground running and we've suddenly got like a household name on our books,
Yeah, that nice Mediterranean flavour to our front line now, isn't there? Mix of Spanish and French, and I think, that I'm excited to see how that all plays out. Like, I think, with Isidore scores some unbelievable goals and has, so much pace and the ability to kind of wow you. Mayenda is very good at dribbling with the ball, with his back to goal turning and spinning, and I just don't see how that doesn't translate. It doesn't matter whether you're in the Premier League or the Championship or the top flight in Spain or Italy or whatever. There aren't many players who can do what he can do when he just runs at people, and I see that translating. And then after that, you got the signing of Guiu, who's another different option. I just really am looking forward to seeing what the three of them can do together.
I think between them, they give us a lot of variety. Mayenda, you're right. The type of things he can do should work in the Premier League. He's a bit of a throwback. I'm sure we've said this before, Gav. It's rare that you've got a striker who can have his back to goal, protect the ball, suddenly do a turn, and then be racing at defenders. That really scares the life out of defenders, no matter what level you're at. Isidore is a brilliant finisher. He scores some very clever goals for us. He's rapid, but he is not a big towering presence at all, So, and that's fine. Players bring different strengths to the team. So between them, they'll be able to do the types of jobs that the team need in different situations. On the topic of us, sorting out Mayenda's contract and what have you. I think I owe Bomber an apology, Gav, because a few weeks ago, I think the three of us were chatting on a pod, and I was saying, with regards to Dan Neil, I don't think the club will be doing any contract negotiations with current players. I thought all of the focus would be on bringing in new players for the time being. Obviously that's not the case because we've been able to sort Labris, we've been able to sort Mayenda. I wonder now if the fact that Speakman has Gasolfi at the club with him, I wonder if that workload is being shared out a bit more and means we can do a few different things all at the same time and be a bit quicker to react to things. It's early days for Gasolfi, but he's been quite prominent in some of the press releases and what have you. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if him being brought in has allowed us to do multiple negotiations and look at different players all at the same time and just made us a bit better behind the scenes in terms of doing deals. I could be talking rubbish, Gavin.
You think about any job, really. You know, you can only allocate so much of your time to certain things. You know, so at the minute we're trying to build a team for the Premier League. So the focus is completely on getting that squad ready. But that doesn't just mean signing players. That means, you know, tying people down to new contracts. And you know, we're going to come on to an outgoing in a second, but I actually think that's probably why the outgoings have kind of been non-existent, because we've got to focus on the priorities, and the priorities are strengthening the team, and it's not weakening the squad, and it's not losing players at the minute. So but I think you've got a point, because, you know, Speakman's only one man, he can't do everything, and I'm sure there's a lot more goes into it than just them two doing everything. But Speakman's your man on the ground. He's the man around the training ground most of the time. The players are used to him. They've worked with him for a long time now. So if there is a situation where a player needs to go through a contract negotiation, that doesn't just involve, okay, Eliezer, come in the office, right, sign that. It's not going to be like that, is it? His representatives are going to be involved. The club are going to be going back and forth on little details, bonuses, clauses when it comes to how many games he plays, and, you know, maybe even things like, well, if I'm signing maybe they were offering 5 years and he was like, well, unless you do this, I'll only sign for 4 years. And, you know, all these things happen that we don't get to see anything about. They could have been in talks with Mayenda's agent since last season, for all we know. So these things can be arduous, lengthy processes, and it's just a nice thing to be able to sit here and say, yeah, Eliezer Mayenda, that's sorted. I never for 1 minute thought he would leave, but I did say not that long ago, you know, I'd be shocked if teams aren't looking at him. And this, again, as I said before, it gives the club insurance, and that's the main thing. He's our player. He can focus on the season ahead. He's probably been given reassurances about his role in the team, and that can only be a good thing. You know, can only be a good thing. Just to move along slightly, then we'll round off on this one, because I did say that the outgoings have slowed down, and one that we brought up, I actually mentioned this on the pod with Tom White yesterday. So it's interesting that this has came up in that little period of time between that pod going out and now. But Pierre Ekwah is somebody who I thought, to be honest, was still a Sunderland player up until a couple of weeks ago. We did a podcast maybe a month or so ago, me, Johnny, and I think it was Bomber, where we went through the squad and we worked out the outgoings and who we thought might leave the club. We talked about Pierre Ekwah then. We were like, well, I presume he's going to leave at some point. But there were murmurings that he'd actually been signed by San Etienne, but nothing had been said. Nothing had been said by San Etienne. Nothing had been said by Sunderland. Nothing had been said by the player on social media. There was nothing. Absolutely nout. So we were all in the dark about that one. But I think just because we've been so caught up in the incomings, we've not really been too arsed about it. But a report has come out in France from Peuple Vert. That was my best French pronunciation of whatever that is. An outlet called Peuple Vert, I think that's how you say it, who have added a bit of context to what's going on. The report claims that San Etienne had indeed triggered a buyout clause of around €6 million, which works out around about £5.1 million over the summer to sign Pierre Ekwah on a permanent deal. which I'm sure the club were delighted with, because that's a lot of money for a player who has no future really with Sunderland. But that has caused a bit of a ruckus for old Pierre, who wasn't happy about the fact that they'd taken up the clause, has claimed apparently that there wasn't full communication between the player, the representatives and the club, that was going to happen. And the situation's been described as delicate. Ekwah, who is reportedly furious with the situation, did of course spend the full season on loan at the end of last year, and apparently did very well. I mean, I did that podcast with Alex Barker last month, and he mentioned right at the end, that he would have actually recommended Pierre Ekwah as someone Sunderland could sign, until he realised that he was actually a Sunderland player and, obviously wasn't going to sign for us since he was already on our books. But apparently did very well, and they got relegated right at the end of the season. I think it was on the last day they got relegated. And the latest claims suggest that he was not told that they would be signing him outright, and it's caused a bit of hell on. He's not returned to first team training since the clause was activated, and his representatives in the club are in talks to try and sort something out. But apparently they broke down very quickly, and now the club are refusing to sanction a free transfer exit, and instead of threatening to relegate him to their reserves if the standoff continues. So it's all got very, very messy for Pierre Ekwah over at St Etienne, and I just thought it was worth bringing that up, Andrew, because again, we've talked about it a little bit. There's a little bit of context as to what's going on. I've got to say, I'm glad we're well out of this. I'm glad we just got our money and we're out of it, because it sounds like a complete mess, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a weird situation. It would be good, I think, from our side, for Sunderland to come out and give us some sort of statement just to say Pierre Ekwah has moved on, though.
Why wouldn't you even just bang him on the retained list when that came out?
Yeah, it's peculiar. But to be fair, Pierre Ekwah, throughout his time at Sunderland, I think there's always been this kind of question mark around him, because Gavi's got the tools to be a top-class Premier League midfielder.
Yeah.
There was a time when, watching him, if somebody had said, Sunderland are going to get promoted in 2025, I would have thought, Ekwah's going to be a big part of that. Ekwah's going to
He played every game, didn't he?
Aye. And then he got, I think he had a dead leg, which he was out for longer than you would usually expect. And then when he came back into the team, he's never quite seemed to be the same player. He sometimes switched off. You said there that he's apparently furious with this situation. There were times on the pitch where he looked the opposite of being furious. He just, you wouldn't think he was capable of being in a bad mood. So there's always been this kind of bizarre kind of aura around him. And this latest situation just seems peculiar. This part of me thinks, well, however, man, if you're going to sign a contract, it's up to you to understand it and be aware of the ramifications.
That was my first thought when I read that. By the way. I was like, how can you and your representatives not know that was going to happen?
Yeah.
You signed your contract.
Yeah, it does. It seems basic that you'd be unaware of that. But then this part of me thinks, has somebody somewhere pulled a fast one? I don't want to be too critical of him, because, as I say, we don't know the full details, and it could well be that something's happened that he wouldn't expect to be aware of. I'm just trying to cover myself there. But certainly your first thought is a bit like, come on, you've got to take a bit of responsibility here. You're dead right, Gav. As a player, I think he did really well last season, and yet the team were relegated. So that's another confusing matter about this. Had they stayed up, would he have been happy to stay there? Or did he just not like the club at all and would have wanted to have moved on no matter what? It's all very odd. And normally it's us this is happening to. It's normally Sunderland who've got a player who didn't realise he'd signed for us, or we didn't realise we'd signed them because we thought we could have got out of it because he had like the Ricky Alvarez situation and all of this.
Didn't it happen? I know it's slightly lesser degree, but didn't it happen with Leon Diaku? Where
yes. Yeah, that's that.
we had to sign him permanently. So
it's nice that it's not our problem at the moment. But I would like to know exactly what's happened, and also I'd like to know that if he has got no connection with Sunderland anymore, I wouldn't mind half an idea about how much we've pocketed out of this. Because
the rumor, like I said before, the rumor was just over 5 million, which I think is quite a decent amount. I don't think that's a bad fee at all. Probably about what he's worth, you know. I agree. Just to round off on this, really, I agree with what you said before about how he's there were moments where I watched Pierre Ekwah and thought he's quality, but he didn't have enough of them days, you know. And he's got everything, like literally 2 great feet, can score from range. He's a big lad, but he just didn't use it enough. And the biggest criticism of his game was he switched off too much. I think the amount of times Tony Mowbray was tearing his hair out over him and stuff, you know, he got dead frustrated with him, didn't he? Because he just wasn't capable mentally of staying switched on. But like, in a couple of years we might be looking at Pierre Ekwah and going, oh, look how much he's kicked on since he left Sunderland. He's capable of it, isn't he? If he goes, if he sorts out whatever's going on here in France and has a good season next season, he's still young enough to get himself a good move somewhere, you know. So I would like to see him do well, but I just think I agree with what you just said before. It's normally us, and I'm glad it's not. I'm glad I'm reading about this story and going, he's off our books, you know, because it's normally us getting caught up in these situations. We pocketed a bit of money. He's now, whatever the problem is with Saint Etienne. And, you know, I wish him all the best. Like, I think he did fairly well for us. But to be honest, I wish he'd had more days like the one against Southampton, where he scored twice and ran the show, and less days like the one he had against Newcastle, where he cost us the game, basically. Yeah. You know, I can't. Yeah, I know it was Newcastle, but I can't get over that. You know, he was it Isak's goal when I don't really want to talk too much about it, but that was Pierre Ekwah, wasn't it? Yeah, let's move on.
You're right. It was that performance was a black mark against him, and that was an example of when he was not switched on. He could be a liability, but he could be a very good player still. And if that happens elsewhere, that's fine. But I don't think I'll look back on it with too much regret, because I think no matter what happens, it wasn't gonna work out for him at Sunderland. I think that ship had sailed, regardless of what happened at Saint Etienne. I think he wasn't going to fit in at Sunderland long term. But yeah, no ill feelings towards the lad, and I hope whatever this dispute is, I hope it's sorted and that he doesn't lose a part of his career by having to sit on a bench somewhere. I hope he's playing again soon.
Yeah. Well, that rounds off today's stories, mate. Thank you very much for joining us, as always.
My pleasure, Gav. It was always nice to have a bit crack on about Sunderland and see what's happening at this club of ours. Yeah.
Tomorrow we've got Dom Shaw from the Northern Echo joining us, and he's going to help us look ahead to the 2 games at the weekend, and also have a little bit of a chat about the summer. We never get bored of that. It's always nice to get different perspectives on the transfer window and the summer and the way things are going. So we've got another a newbie as well. I don't think Dom's ever been on the show, so that's the first for us at Haway The Podcast. So make sure you tune in for that. We will have reaction pods after both games, hopefully, over the weekend. So there's that as well. If you haven't already caught up on this week's podcasts, we had yesterday we had Tom White from Sky Sports News jumping on to chat about transfers. We've had the On This Week pod. There's been other news bits and pieces this week. So we've had a pod out every single day this week. Make sure you get caught up on everything if you haven't already. Just like to give another little plug for the new website. We've actually switched over to a WordPress site. It's all different now over at rotoreport.sbnation.com. There were a few teething issues in the first couple of days. We're working through them with the overlords at SB Nation, but we are getting there, and I'm hoping everybody's able to navigate the website. There's a new comments feature. There's also the feed, which is like our social media feed, I guess, where you can leave little threads and you can comment on what other people are saying and stuff. We're going to get that going over the coming weeks and months. So, yeah, plenty to get caught up on the website if you haven't already. On social media, we are at Roker Report everywhere you look. And, yeah, we'll be back with another pod tomorrow with Dom Shaw. So we'll see you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.